Yo, the vault just cracked open, and Drake's whole empire is bleeding out in real time. Howard Stern. Yeah, that Howard Stern. Just reached into a dusty archive nobody knew existed and detonated a nuclear device on Drake's entire 2026 comeback campaign. What fell out of that vault is so devastating, so surgically timed, so perfectly aimed at the OVO throat that half the industry is asking if this was an accident or an assassination. And Drake? Bro really thought dropping 43 songs, a lawsuit, and a manosphere pivot was gonna save him. Aubrey picked the worst possible moment to remind everyone why he lost the first war. Before we get into it, like, subscribe, don't miss it, nah. Kendrick Lamar, K. himself, just got resurrected in the culture through a never-broadcast Howard Stern interview recorded back in 2017 during the Damn cycle, and Stern quietly released it into the public bloodstream in the middle of Drake's Iceman rollout. The tape dropped with zero announcement, zero press blast, zero warning, just materialized on the internet and set the entire industry on fire. Aubrey really thought he could run a comeback campaign without checking who was sitting on 9-year-old ammunition. Now let's look at the receipts that show why this backfired so hard it broke the sound barrier. Alright, let me walk you through the actual words, because this is where the case starts building itself brick by brick. In the Howard Stern interview recorded in 2017 and released to the public in 2026, Kendrick sits across from Howard, 30 years old, fresh off 11 Grammy nominations for Damn, and Stern hits him with a question every rapper dreads. Stern asks him about being labeled the next Jay-Z, the next Tupac. And Kendrick's response, y'all listen to this exact phrasing because it matters. He says, and I quote, "These are individuals I've studied. The acknowledgement is great. But at the end of the day, as long as I don't get caught up in the idea or the design of being exactly like these artists, and I continue to be Kendrick Lamar, then all I can do is move forward." When I heard that quote for the first time, I had to rewind it 3 times, because that ain't just an answer to Stern. That's a thesis statement. That's a manifesto delivered in the softest voice possible, and it aged like fine wine sitting in a cellar waiting for the exact moment it would be uncorked. Then Stern goes deeper. In that same 2017 interview, he asks Kendrick point-blank whether he has to feel he's better than the other rappers walking around. And Kendrick doesn't flinch. He says, and this is the line that has the whole industry sweating, "Yes, I have to. Because that's the only way the culture moves forward." Yo, this part is wild. He didn't say, "I want to be the best." He didn't say, "I'm competitive." He tied his self-belief directly to the forward motion of the entire genre. That's not ego. That's a burden. That's a man saying his individual excellence is a responsibility to hip-hop itself. And 9 years later, when the culture watched him deliver Not Like Us and headline the Super Bowl 60 halftime show for 133.5 million viewers, that 2017 statement stopped sounding philosophical and started sounding prophetic. Then Stern pushes one more time in that same 2017 sit-down, asking about the trophy conversation, the Grammys, the accolades. And Kendrick, calm as ever, delivers the line that landed hardest in 2026. He says, "The trophies are appreciated, but the real measurement is the culture. The real measurement is whether the music will still be studied 30 years from now." Nah bruh. When I read this quote in the context of what Drake is doing right now in 2026, I had to do a double take. Because Aubrey has spent the last 12 months measuring himself in first-week units, in Billboard positions, in triple album chart maneuvers. 2 different men, 2 different scoreboards. Bro said what? That's the dumbest flex I've ever heard when you compare it to Kendrick's framework. Then there's the line from the same tape where Kendrick tells Stern that when artists get caught up in that type of hype, that's when things get a little tricky. That's when it becomes pressure. That's when it stops being fun. Because now you're looking for expectations. Hold up, let me sit with that quote for a full minute. Because that sentence right there, that's a mirror held up to every artist chasing validation instead of art. He's not naming names. He doesn't need to name names. He's describing a condition. And Drake in 2026, staring down a defamation lawsuit against his own label, is walking around like the poster child of that condition. That line right there, that's where Aubrey lost the plot, and he doesn't even know it happened. And then we got the receipts from the current cycle too. Drake, in the Iceman outro released May 15, 2026, said the actual words that his worst month was July. He put it on wax. He confessed it into the microphone. He handed the calendar page to Kendrick with the bow tied on top. When I heard that, I said, nah, this is different. This ain't a rapper making a random reference. This is a man handing his opponent a loaded gun and asking him to please point it at the wall. Now that we got the quotes, let's connect the dots on the timeline, because the sequencing tells a story the surface level fans are missing. Alright, y'all lock in, because the timeline of how we got here is where the real conspiracy energy kicks in. Let me lay it out plain. In March 2024, Kendrick drops his verse on Like That. By May 2024, Not Like Us is #1 on the Hot 100 and the argument is over. February 2025, Kendrick sweeps the Grammys with Record of the Year and Song of the Year, then delivers a Super Bowl halftime performance in front of 133.5 million viewers that becomes the single most watched halftime show in history. Meanwhile, Drake filed his defamation suit against Universal Music Group in November 2024. That interview, recorded 7 years before any of this drama existed. Nobody in that 2017 studio knew a thing called Not Like Us would ever exist. Nobody knew about the Super Bowl. Nobody knew a certified lover boy would be filing a lawsuit against his own distributor. And yet, the words spoken in that room predicted every single one of these outcomes with unsettling accuracy. Remember that suit? Dismissed by a federal judge in New York in October 2025 as protected artistic expression. Drake appealed in January 2026. Discovery reportedly wrapping up right now. So while Kendrick was collecting Grammys and headlining Super Bowls, Aubrey was in a courtroom trying to sue the corporation that distributes his own records. That's the timeline. That's the sequence. So Drake did this 3 months after the appeal filing? That's terrible timing, bruh. Now here's where the behind-the-scenes context gets spicy. That Stern tape sat in the vault for 9 years. 9. Howard Stern has interviewed Paul McCartney, Quentin Tarantino, Bruce Springsteen. His vault is legendary. He doesn't dump material by accident. And the release lined up almost perfectly with the Iceman rollout on May 15, 2026. A triple album detonation containing Iceman, Habibti, and Maid of Honor, all landing at 1, 2, and 3 on the Billboard 200 in the same week. Iceman alone moved roughly 475,000 units in its first week. Now think about this. The relationships in play here matter. Howard Stern isn't in the Drake orbit. Stern operates in a different universe entirely, sitting in his SiriusXM chair, unbothered by the daily churn of the hip-hop news cycle. So the question isn't, did Stern coordinate with Kendrick? The question is, did Stern read the room and recognize that his 2017 tape was suddenly the most valuable piece of media he was sitting on? Because whether it was calculated or intuitive, the man who has spent 30 years reading cultural moments hit publish at the exact instant Drake was most exposed. His statement, dropped while the OVO camp was already 6 weeks deep into damage control from the mixed critical reception of Iceman. Variety called Iceman vindictive. The Guardian dissected Drake's pivot toward the manosphere. Clash magazine wrote that the record found Drake settling every gripe he'd ever collected. NPR flat out said this was Drake at his angriest. So imagine being in the OVO war room watching your carefully orchestrated comeback narrative get eaten alive by every music publication on the planet, and then the Stern tape drops. Any smart advisory team would have seen this coming. But Aubrey isn't listening to smart advisory teams anymore. He's listening to Grievance. And the deeper context nobody's connecting? PG Lang and Interscope. According to insiders who correctly called the Don Toliver rollout, the Harry Styles rollout, and Baby Keem's placements this year, Kendrick's next album is in the final stages of mastering. Whether it drops in late June 2026 or the first 2 weeks of July, the timing is choreographed. Drake handed Kendrick July on the Iceman outro. So, opposition really thought nobody would connect these dots? That's the kind of oversight you can't recover from. Now the past beef context is where this gets even more brutal. Because this isn't just Kendrick versus Drake round 2. This is the closing chapter of a philosophical war that's been running since 2013 when Kendrick's Control verse first named Drake among the rappers he was coming for. Every move since has been a chess piece. The Big Three dismissal on Like That? Chess piece. Euphoria? Chess piece. 616 in LA? Chess piece. Not Like Us? Checkmate. And the Stern tape is the post-game interview footage where the champion explains, 9 years in advance, exactly why he was always going to win. That's when you know Aubrey doesn't have real advisors around him, because any real advisor would have told him, when you're fighting a man who plans in decades, you don't fight back in single months. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Now check this out. Nobody's talking about the specific word choice Kendrick made in that Stern interview. Zoom in with me on one phrase. When he said the acknowledgement is great, but the real work is continuing to be Kendrick Lamar. That word be is doing enormous heavy lifting. He didn't say act like. He didn't say perform as. He said be. That's an ontological choice. That's identity as verb. Kendrick isn't performing greatness. He's inhabiting it. And Aubrey, on the Iceman outro admitting July was his worst month, isn't inhabiting anything. He's confessing. That single word choice reveals two entirely different relationships to selfhood. And opposition really didn't catch that? That's embarrassing at the philosophical level. Now zoom in on the phrase "move forward" from that same 2017 answer. Kendrick could have said, "keep working." He could have said, "stay focused." He picked "move forward." Forward is a direction, a vector, a compass reading. It implies destination and momentum. It implies leaving something behind. And when you overlay that phrase onto Drake's 2026 posture, a man appealing a court dismissal from 2025, dropping subliminals aimed at a beef from 2024, dragging grievances from 2023 into his triple album, you see the forensic contrast. Kendrick's compass points north. Drake's compass is spinning in circles. One man walks forward. The other man walks in place while insisting he's making progress. Now let's zoom into the gesture nobody's analyzing on that Stern audio, the pause. Right before Kendrick answers Stern's, "Do you have to feel your better?" question, he pauses. Not a long pause but a measured one. That pause is a decision. It's the audio equivalent of a boxer taking one step back to line up the counter. When he finally answers, his cadence drops half a beat. That's not accidental. That's a rapper who understands that words have weight. Compare that to Drake on Iceman, spitting bars at 190 words per minute, cramming subliminals into every 8-bar chorus. One artist uses silence as a weapon. The other uses volume as a shield. If Aubrey had half a brain, he'd study that pause. He'd learn what restraint sounds like. And the pattern forensics reach even further. Study Kendrick's public appearances over the last 3 years. He rations his presence. GNX dropped without a rollout. The Super Bowl performance was executed without a pre-show media blitz. He speaks through the work. Now study Drake's rollout patterns. Every album since 2022 has been preceded by an Instagram carousel campaign, a listening party leak strategy, a podcast circuit crawl. One artist behaves like a monk with a microphone. The other behaves like a marketing department with a personality. And 9 years ago, in that Stern chair, Kendrick told the entire world which of those two approaches would produce work that survives 30 years. That's the problem with Aubrey. He doesn't read between the lines. He reads the algorithm. Now let's touch on the legal fine points too, because this is where the forensic layer goes nuclear. Drake's defamation suit rested on the argument that Not Like Us falsely portrayed him in a specific way. The federal court in October 2025 ruled the record was protected artistic expression. In the appeal filed January 2026, the language shifted from defamation to arguments about distribution and promotion. A subtle pivot that legal analysts read as a retreat from the original claim. That's not a rapper winning in court. That's a rapper watching his lawyers narrow the surface area of his own argument. Zoom into that pivot. That single procedural adjustment is a confession dressed up as strategy. Aubrey thought that pivot was a comeback. Nah bruh, that pivot was a surrender disguised as respect. Alright, so let's talk about how the outlets framed all of this, because the narrative divergence is telling its own story. Complex framed the Stern tape release as a cultural moment, treating it as archive footage with retrospective weight, careful to avoid explicit alignment with Kendrick's side. Their coverage read like a magazine spread, appreciative, measured, and just cautious enough to keep future access to both camps open. But Hip Hop DX framed the exact same tape as a philosophical indictment of the Drake comeback. That's a completely different spin. Where Complex saw archive, Hip Hop DX saw ammunition. And the framing shift matters because it signals where the specialist hip-hop press is drawing lines. When the outlets that live and breathe this culture treat something as ammunition, that's the culture speaking through them. Then you got Variety, whose take on the Iceman rollout dropped a week before the Stern release. Variety framed Iceman as vindictive. That word vindictive is doing enormous work. It's not aggressive. It's not hungry. It's vindictive, which implies petty, personal, backward-looking. Variety's framing set the emotional register for how the rest of the mainstream press was going to receive the album. Consequence of Sound cataloged the sneak Thesis. Clash magazine talked about Drake's grievance stack. NPR called it Drake at his angriest. The framing was almost uniform across the board. Iceman wasn't a comeback, it was a receipt file. Now some opposition fans are saying this is cap. They're saying the mainstream press has always been biased against Drake, that Variety and The Guardian don't understand hip-hop, that these are the same outlets that misread Certified Lover Boy back in 2021. But those are the same people who thought the defamation lawsuit was a smart legal move. Those are the same folks who thought the Aiden Ross alignment was strategic positioning. If you still think Aubrey has a point after all this evidence, the Stern tape, the court dismissal, the appeal narrowing, the near-uniform media framing, you're just biased. And the media trying to spin it for opposition can't touch this because the receipts don't lie. Then there's the counter-narrative floating in the OVO orbit that says the Iceman first week 475,000 units proves the culture is still with Drake. Rolling Stone hinted at that framing in a review that emphasized commercial dominance over critical reception. But remember the framework from earlier, the framework where the real measurement isn't first-week units, it's whether the music will be studied 30 years from now? That framework, delivered 9 years ago in a Manhattan radio studio, quietly destroys the entire OVO defense before it can even leave the launchpad. But here's what nobody is saying. Here's what nobody is talking about. This isn't about the Stern tape. This isn't about Iceman. This isn't even really about Kendrick versus Drake. This is about industry politics, and the fact that the machine has quietly, invisibly, and permanently shifted its endorsement. The mainstream narrative wants you to believe this is a two-artist rivalry. Fan versus fan. Bar versus bar. Chart position versus chart position. That framing is comfortable because it lets everyone pretend the game is fair, that the outcome is being decided by talent and taste alone. Here's the real story though, the industry decided the winner of this war a long time ago, and everything that's happened in 2026, from the Stern tape release to the media framing of Iceman to the whisper campaign about Kendrick's upcoming album, is the machine executing a decision that was made in boardrooms nobody outside the C-suite got to see. Think about it. Universal Music Group is Drake's own label. UMG is also the label that distributes Kendrick through Interscope and PG Lang. UMG had a choice: defend the artist who has generated billions in catalog value over 15 years, or defend the artist who represents where the culture is going for the next 15. They chose the future. That's why the defamation suit got dismissed. That's why the appeal isn't gaining traction. That's why Iceman's marketing budget was massive, but the internal PR support was suspiciously restrained. Aubrey is a puppet, and the label is quietly cutting the strings. The industry needs Drake to fail because Drake represents a business model: algorithmic saturation, feature-driven ubiquity, streaming volume as artistic value, that the labels themselves are now realizing has a shelf life. Kendrick represents a different model: restrained catalog value, critical prestige, cultural longevity, festival headlining leverage for the next 30 years. Which of those two models do you think a label prioritizes when it's plotting revenue projections into 2050? It's not even close. And Aubrey is watching the tide go out on the very shore he built his sandcastle on. Now connect that to the Stern tape. Howard Stern operates on Sirius XM, which has commercial partnerships across the industry ecosystem. Do you really think a vault release of that magnitude, dropped at that surgical timing, happened without anyone in the ecosystem knowing it was coming? Remember those quotes we broke down earlier? They didn't just resurface, they were resurfaced. Someone somewhere greenlit that moment. And whether Stern acted on his own instinct or on a nudge from a coordinated party, the effect is the same. The industry moved a chess piece, and Drake didn't even see the board. This is a masterclass in psychological warfare wrapped in industry politics. Aubrey is playing checkers while K-Dot is playing chess against opponents Drake doesn't even know exist. The Stern tape isn't a diss, it's a psychological operation. It doesn't attack Drake directly. It just quietly installs Kendrick's framework as the moral center of the conversation. And once that framework is installed, every move Drake makes reads as confirmation of it. Every subliminal on Iceman becomes evidence that he's caught up in the hype. Every court filing becomes proof that he's stopped having fun. Every chart maneuver becomes another expectation he's chasing instead of an art he's creating. Kendrick trapped him inside a philosophical prison that Aubrey helped build for himself. And the cultural impact angle makes it even worse. That timeline we established? It reveals a generational shift. The rappers who came up watching Drake are now the rappers watching Kendrick. Baby Keem, Doeki IJID, the entire class of artists who represent where hip-hop is heading. Every single one of them has publicly aligned with the Kendrick philosophical framework. Not with beefs, not with tribalism, with the framework. The study greatness, be yourself, move forward framework. That framework won the generation before Iceman even released. Aubrey represents the old guard that the culture is done with. He's watching the entire youth movement quietly walk past him toward a different podium, and the more he screams for attention, the more he confirms that the podium isn't his anymore. And here's the authenticity kill shot, the rewriting of history. Drake on Iceman tries to reframe the 2024 beef as a temporary setback, a bad month, a misunderstood moment. But the Stern tape's mere existence exposes that revision. Because the Stern tape proves Kendrick's philosophy was consistent long before the beef existed. Kendrick didn't invent his framework in response to Drake. Kendrick invented Kendrick's framework in 2017, and probably earlier. And the beef was just the moment that framework finally got publicly tested. Aubrey is rewriting history because his real story isn't impressive enough to compete with the truth. And Aubrey's whole current persona, the aggrieved warrior, the manosphere sympathizer, the courtroom crusader, is manufactured, and it's falling apart in real time on major label money. And that's the truth they won't tell you. The machine already made its choice. The generation already made its choice. The philosophy already made its choice. The only person still fighting the decision is the person who lost it. So what happens next? Here's what's most likely to happen. Kendrick's next album is gonna drop in the July window that Drake himself outlined on the Iceman outro. And the release is gonna be executed with the same surgical restraint that defined the GNX rollout. No pre-release singles. No podcast circuit. No Instagram teaser slides. Just a title, a release date, and a full body of work landing on a Friday morning like a meteor. When that album lands, Aubrey is gonna look desperate, screaming into a void that stopped listening the moment the tracklist hit the platforms. The silence from the OVO camp in the 72 hours after that release is gonna hurt Drake more than any diss track could, because silence in the streaming era is the loudest confession there is. The features on that record, mark my words, are gonna include Baby Keem in a moment that finally elevates him from cousin-adjacent talent to first-tier collaborator. Soundwave is gonna handle the sonic architecture the way he's handled every meaningful chapter of the Kendrick catalog. Jack Antonoff is gonna sit in the co-pilot seat, because that partnership has been the quiet renaissance of the last 3 Kendrick years. And the whisper that won't die, the Kendrick and Tyler, the creator collaboration that has evaded the culture for a decade, is finally gonna land, and when it does, the entire industry stops breathing. Aubrey will try to escalate. He'll drop a diss. He'll try to draw Kendrick into a public exchange. Nobody's gonna care. When you're arguing with a man who just delivered a generational album, your bars sound like static. Now, if the alternative path happens instead, if Kendrick does engage, if he does respond directly, if he does name Drake on the record, then Aubrey is gonna get destroyed at a level that makes 2024 look like a warm-up round. Because Kendrick has been sitting on 9 years of philosophical framework, on Super Bowl-level production leverage, on the entire Interscope machine positioning behind him. Drake is not ready for what's coming if K-Dot decides to make this personal on wax. We saw what Kendrick did to Aubrey with Not Like Us, a track written in a matter of days. Imagine what he can do with a full album cycle behind him. Drizzy doesn't stand a chance if the response comes direct. Either scenario ends the same way, with the Toronto side of the war permanently reduced. Looking at the bigger picture, this is going to be the moment everyone remembers as when Drake's cultural relevance died, not commercially but philosophically. 5 years from now, when the streaming numbers are footnotes and only the catalog remains, people are going to look back at this Kendrick album and say that's the record that closed the book on the streaming era. That's the record that proved restraint outlasts volume. That's the record that installed a new operating system for what greatness in hip-hop means. And Aubrey is going to be watching the culture move on without him from a stage he no longer sees, and there's nothing he can do about it, because the framework that decided his fate was installed in a Manhattan radio studio 9 years before he even knew he was losing. The 2011 alignment of Section 80 Sideline Story, and Take Care from Kendrick, Cole, and Drake was the beginning of an era. The 2026 alignment of these same 3 artists closing out their defining catalog moments in the same 12-month window is going to be the end of that era. And the artist who walks out of that window with the strongest catalog is going to be measured against for the next 30 years, exactly the way Kendrick predicted the measurement would happen. Drake played his hand. Cole played his hand with the fall off. Kendrick hasn't played his hand yet. And that's the most terrifying sentence in the industry right now. Because when it hits, Aubrey's legacy takes a hit that the appeal courts can't reverse and the manosphere alliances can't defend. Whatever happens, one thing's clear: Drake already lost. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed uncovering the real story, smash that like button and hit subscribe so you never miss when we expose what everyone else is too scared to say. Ring that bell for notifications. And if you want more truth bombs like this, click on one of these videos next. Trust me, you'll want to see what we found.